Hello, welcome to the channel. Today I am going to be doing a somewhat belated review of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. This came out on Netflix a couple weeks ago. I watched it in the theater a few weeks ago and I wanted to talk about it. I have a lot of notes, a lot of opinions about this movie. I would say like a casual Del Toro fan. I know that there's a lot of people who think he's like one of the best filmmakers in the world, and I certainly wouldn't go that far. But I always enjoy his movies, and I am a big fan of the Frankenstein novel, as I'm sure a lot of people are. So I came into this movie with somewhat high expectations, and I have a couple of issues with it, but generally I walked away enjoying it. So just keep that in mind as I start to pick apart a few of my criticisms with it. I'll start with the two characters because I like everything that they did with the creature for the most part, and I'm really not a fan of most of what they did with Victor Frankenstein, specifically with the changes they make to the novel. Oscar Isaac is doing his best. Isaac is always fantastic, and he's hamming it up, maybe a little bit too much with the accent, but for the most part, I enjoy his performance. I just think the writing of his character is pretty weak, specifically in the way that they rewrite his motivations for why he makes the monster, and really boiling all down to having an Oedipus complex and wanting to be better than his father. I find that it takes away a lot of the nuance, a lot of the intrigue of the character when you just simplify his motivations like that. One of the most interesting ideas in Frankenstein is intellectual ambition and curiosity getting the best of someone, and someone not really knowing when to stop and just kind of falling into madness and not being able to stop himself from doing something that is detrimental to both him, both the creature that he makes, and humanity as a whole. That's a really fascinating idea that is kind of in here, but is sort of dumbed down by having this 20 to 30 minute long backstory at the beginning of this movie about how early on in his life he was like, I am going to cheat death because my father wasn't able to save my mother. Which, this is the main issue I have with Del Toro as a filmmaker, is he always goes with a very obvious choice for his characters. Immediately, it's pretty clear what they're doing in this movie when you know that Mia Goth is playing the love interest, and Mia Goth also is playing the mother, and also Frankenstein is drinking milk all the time. Like, it's so clear they're going for an Oedipus complex about 10 minutes into this movie. Once you realize a lot of this is boiling down to daddy issues and mommy issues, you can basically map out exactly what they're going to do with the Victor Frankenstein character. And I do like the idea of Victor trying to become a father to the creature and trying to do better than his own father did, and obviously failing miserably. I like that idea. I just don't know if it's necessarily executed particularly well. Another issue I have with the way Victor is portrayed is he just doesn't get crazy enough, and it doesn't get dark enough. And this is more a general criticism of the tone of this film, which is very whimsical and a little bit like too bright in my opinion. And they really take away a lot of the horror aspects of this movie. It's gothic, but it's kind of like light gothic. The best example of this is a moment where Victor is like suturing together a hand for the creature, and it's really gross and gnarly. There's just like a lot of ligaments going on, and it just like looks gross. But the score is like very bright. I don't really know why they made this choice, because in my opinion, this is like a dark ass story. This is a guy going into graves, digging up bodies, suturing them together. And that should be hard to watch. That should be grotesque. And yet, it all feels a little bit too clean and too sanitized. I also feel this with the character design of the creature himself. The stitches are just like a little too clean. You need to feel the seams. You need to feel like this is actually someone who is stitched together by one guy in this weird dark basement, rather than the way it feels, which he almost looks more like an alien than actually a creature, because the lines are so clean. Talking about this more sanitized tone leads me into one of my other criticisms about this movie. And I will say, I will get to the good stuff later on. I do like this movie, but I have a lot of notes. Visually speaking, there are shots in this movie that I think look quite ugly. When I was watching it in the theater, I had not like read any criticism about it beforehand. But as I was watching it, I was like, wow, this looks a lot like Wicked, a movie from last year that I thought looked quite ugly often as well. And then after watching it and hearing criticism on it, a lot of people seem to feel the same way. So I'm glad that I wasn't alone in that. And this really only applies to like daytime exterior shots, all the nighttime stuff, all the stuff in the basement, even all the Antarctica stuff is pretty devoid of this criticism, but there's a lot of desaturation within the moments that are in the daytime when the sun is shining, and it just drains the color from this movie, which is a shame because the costume design and the production design are great and they're really colorful, and yet the colors aren't allowed to pop within a frame because it's all being desaturated into like this just general gray. And I found that to be very frustrating, specifically within the reanimation sequence, a moment that I was really excited for. But the first section of this reanimation sequence is in the daytime, and there's so many shots that I think are supposed to be awe-inspiring and oh, they're finally doing it. And I just found them to be very aesthetically unpleasing shots to look at. Now, in praise of the cinematography, the stuff in Antarctica looks gorgeous. And anytime they're in interiors, this criticism almost entirely goes away. I think this movie is like 70% gorgeous and 30% I wish this looked way better. My other final very small criticism, the Christoph Waltz character is completely pointless. I have no idea why he's in the movie, and this is pretty minor because he is not in the movie for that long, but it gives Frankenstein a bunch of funding, which to me also kind of takes away from the dark, weird, I'm going out there and doing my own thing and digging up grave vibe that I think is necessary for this character to be as insane as he should be, and is really only used to satisfy a plot hole that I don't think a lot of people had. I don't think a lot of people were reading this book where a guy reanimates a corpse and was like, how did he get the funding? That's just not something that people think about because they're willing to suspend disbelief because it's cool as shit. And so I thought that was a strange choice. But on to the good stuff, which is largely occurring within the second half of this movie. Jacob Elordi as the creature is absolutely fantastic. Really, really nails the mannerisms here. He towers over everybody, and the way that he moves kind of lankily and weirdly really makes sense for the creature, who is obviously learning how to walk, learning how to talk, learning how to live. And it's very fascinating to watch him progress as this movie goes on. I was very excited about all of the stuff with the family in the hut because that's my favorite part of the entire book. And they nail that part. I think it's absolutely spectacular. His relationship with the old man is just perfect. I really do feel as though Del Toro was far more fascinated with the creature than he was with Victor. And that's why the first half that focuses on Frankenstein is much weaker than the second half, which focuses mainly on the creature. Mia Goth also absolutely killing it. The couple of scenes with her and Elordi are the best parts of the movie. I think the score is generally fantastic. And this movie is paced very well, I would say, and structured in a really interesting way. Obviously doing a lot of the narrative framing that the novel does, but it's 2.5 hours and it doesn't really feel like it. I would say that you could cut quite a bit from the first 30 minutes of this movie when it's getting into Victor's childhood. But other than that, it's very tight. Every single scene progresses the plot forward. You learn something more about the characters in every single moment. And the best thing that this movie has going for it is that it ends on its strongest note. That final encounter between Victor and the creature is really quite powerful. The final couple shots of this movie not only look gorgeous, but work very well for the character of the creature. So even in what I consider to be a pretty middle-of-the-road Del Toro movie, he still finds ways to be very emotionally affecting as a storyteller and very impressive as a filmmaker. That's really all I have to say. Let me know what you thought about Frankenstein. I know a lot of people really love this movie. Obviously, like I've mentioned in this video, I did have some problems with it, but generally I walked away having a good time, feeling like it had a little bit of missed potential. Could have been one of my favorites of the year, but ended up just being a pretty good movie. I would give this a 3 out of 5. And I would say that Jacob Elordi is absolutely the highlight. And definitely a movie worth watching. It's on Netflix right now. If you can see it in theaters, definitely watch it in theaters because, like I mentioned, some shots in this movie just absolutely awe-inspiring. And I will leave it at that. Next week, I will be talking about the new Knives Out movie. I might be ranking all 3 Knives Out films. I'm not entirely sure yet. But stay tuned for that. Subscribe, like, let me know how you feel about Frankenstein. And that is it. I will see you later.